Hello and welcome. The Async function is a new added feature to ECMAScript 2017, which is also referred to as ES8. The Async function declaration defines an asynchronous function which returns an async function object. When you say something is asynchronous, you're talking about an execution that does not have to wait for other executions to complete before it executes. So when you're executing code, you can do that synchronously or asynchronously. When you execute synchronously, the task within the code has to finish in that sequence. So you can't go to task B until you finish task A. With asynchronous execution, you don't have to wait for task A to finish before you start task B. So that's the key difference between asynchronous and synchronous execution. So what is an asynchronous function? An asynchronous function basically is a function which operates asynchronously via the event loop using an implicit promise to return its result. So what is a promise? The promise object basically is used to represent the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation and its resulting value. Also, an async function can contain an await expression that can be used to pause an execution. When you're using the await keyword, you have to use it inside the async function. If you use it outside the async function's body, you will get a syntax error. So the main purpose of the async or await functions is basically to simplify the behavior of using promises synchronously and to perform some behavior on a group of promises. To illustrate how the async function works, I have got two sets of functions here. I've got a normal function, which I've called resolve after 2 seconds. And in between the curly braces is the logic for that function. And I've got an async function that I have called async call. To define an async function, you just type in async function and then you give it a name. If you notice here in this function here, it's going to return a new promise. Promise basically is an object that represents the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation and its resulting value. So this is a promise, and I've got a timeout set on 2 milliseconds. So once the timeout has elapsed, it will output this text on the console. It will say resolve. So the resolve here will output this text. For the async function here, I've got console.log and it will output this text, say calling, and I've created a variable called result, and I've set the value of this variable called result to await this function, which is called resolve after 2 seconds. The await expression here is going to be used to pause the execution of this function for 2 milliseconds. So if I call this function here by typing in async call, what it will do, it will print out this text, it will do a console.log and print out this text called calling. It will then pause this here using this await. It will pause the execution of this for 2 seconds. And then after that 2 seconds elapse, it will now output this text on the screen saying resolved. So let me execute that, press enter. You can see here, this calling here, you can see there was a delay before this text was displayed. So here, what's happened here, the console.log, when I call this function, it will output this text called calling, which is this. And then I had a promise here, which was pending. And here I've got an await expression, which delayed the execution of this function for 2 milliseconds. That's why there was a gap after this text was displayed. And you can see here it says promise pending. If I expand that, it should show the promise has resolved. You can see here promise status now resolved. Okay. So, and then it gives you this resolved text, which is this text here inside the resolve parameter here. So that's basically how the async function works. I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't, please feel free to get in touch. I'll be more than happy to explain more. Thanks for watching and bye for now.